The Song of Ice and Fire world has a vast history, spanning tens of thousands of years. What started as a video about the Valyrian Freehold has ended up covering so much more. Exact timelines and dates of events are unclear, but I did my best to make them flow chronologically. I will begin far back, around 25,000 years before Aegon's conquest, in the time of the Empire of Atale. The god on earth was said to be descended from the line of night and the maiden made of light. In the far east of Essos, the colossal empire of Atale was said to be formed by the god on earth, whose realm stretched from the Jade Sea to the Shivering Sea, from the mountains known as the Bones to the great freezing desert of the north. This great frozen desert is very likely the same freezing desert that the Westerosi call the Lands of Always Winter. After 10,000 years of his rule, the god on earth passed the domain of mankind to his eldest son, known as the Pearl Emperor. Around 12,000 years before the conquest, during the Dawn Age, the first men invaded Westeros by crossing the Arm of Dorne. In Westeros, they fought the children of the forest and the giants, overwhelming them with numbers and pushing them northwards, while creating hundreds of small kingdoms. After nearly 2,000 years of war, the first men and the children signed a pact, ending the Dawn Age at around 10,000 BC. Following the Dawn Age came the Age of Heroes. It was around this time when the founders of the noble houses lived, such as Bran the Builder, who founded House Stark, and Lann the Clever, who took the rock from House Casterly and founded House Lannister. Back in the far east of Essos, the Pearl Emperor ruled ET for 1,000 years, and his successors each ruled the empire for centuries at a time. Every new god emperor's reign was shorter than who came before him. This Bloodstone Emperor performed dark arts and necromancy. He enslaved his people and tortured them, marrying a tiger woman and feasting on the flesh of humans. All around the world there are oily black stones, like the Sea Stone Chair in the base of a high tower, the ones in Severos and on the Isle of Toads. The Bloodstone Emperor worshipped a black stone that fell from the sky, and many call him the first high priest of a Church of Starry Wisdom. The horrors committed by the Bloodstone Emperor were said to invoke the wrath of the Lion of Night, who unleashed his wrath on the realms of men, and caused the Maiden of Light to turn her back on the world. The long night had come, and in Westeros, winter had come. In Westeros, the Evers invaded from the Lands of Always Winter, and in Essos, dark horrors came, likely from the frozen wastes, to destroy the realms of men. Like the Bloodstone Emperor and his practice of starry wisdom, the Evers used necromancy to raise armies of the undead. It was then, when the realms of men were near destruction, that the legendary figure known by many names, such as Azor Ahai and Yentar, forged Lightbringer. Both Westeros and Essos have versions of the Lightbringer and the Battle for the Dawn. There are many theories about this topic, but in general, every ancient civilization speaks of the same story. A hero-wielding Lightbringer who defeated the horrors from the icy north. In Westeros, the children and the First Men united under a hero-wielding Lightbringer and defeated the Evers with fire and dragonglass. In ET, the realm of men united under a hero-wielding Lightbringer and defeated the horrors that invaded the world. Afterwards, Bran the Builder made the wall on the border of the Lands of Always Winter, and the Night's Watch was formed to guard the realm of men. In ET, there is also a barrier on the edge of the Grey Wastes, called the Five Forts. Just like the wall, these were colossal. After the wall was built, the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch joined with a female lover from beyond the wall and declared himself the Night's King. At that time, the Night's Watch had more than enough men to man every castle and fort in the wall, and the Night's King used this army to enforce his reign of terror. The King Beyond the Wall, known as G.R.R.M, and the Starks of Winterfell joined forces to defeat the Night's King and restored honor to the Night's Watch. King G.R.R.M found the Horn of Winter and used it to wake giants from the earth. The Empire of Olgias conquered much of Essos, west of the Bones. They did not conquer the lands of ET and others east of the Bones. Slaver's Bay was taken by the lockstep legions of the Guesciari, who built the Great Pyramid of Meereen. They expanded all over Essos and sailed south, forming colonies in Severos and the Basilisk Islands. The world's history is vast, and the Empire of Olgias was already ancient by the time the Valyrian sheep herders discovered dragons living in the volcanoes known as the 14 Fires. Over many centuries, the Valyrians learned to tame dragons using magic, and mastered raising and training them into beasts of war. Over the next 3,000 years, or 1,000 years, depending on how you see the timeline, the city of Valyria grew into a grand capital, and the Valyrian Freehold was established. Magic was at its height, and the Valyrians built colossal structures, and towers that rose into the clouds. The smiths used spells to forge incredible weapons and armor, made of steel with godlike properties. Nearly 20,000 years after the first god emperors ruled the Empire of Dawn, the Age of Valyria had begun. The ancient empire of Old Gis sent its lockstep legions to attack the rising power of the Freehold 5 times, and 5 times the Valyrian dragon riders defeated the legions. In the final Guesciari War, the Valyrian armies marched to the city of Old Gis and ended their ancient civilization. The city was razed to the ground, and the fields around it were sowed with sulfur, salt, and the skulls of fallen foes. After the Guesciari capital was annihilated, the Valyrians inherited the territories of Old Gis and adopted their practice of slavery, now controlling the Valyrian peninsula, all of Slaver's Bay, and everything in between, including the colonies of Severos. The Valyrians expanded westward. Using their defeated foes as slaves, the Valyrians built great roads connecting all of their cities and sent slaves to mine vast riches from the 14 Flames. The Rhoynar, who lived all along the river Rhoyne, coexisted peacefully with the Valyrians for years. The Valyrians instead set forth from their colony at Valentis and waged war on the Andals of Andalos. Facing defeat and enslavement by the Valyrians, the Andals crossed the Narrow Sea and invaded Westeros, landing in the Vale. They drew the 7-pointed star and waged war on the Firstmen and the Children of the Forest. As the Andals were destroying the old gods, slaying the Children of the Forest and forcing the Firstmen to migrate north, the Valyrians were slaying the Andals who stayed behind in Andalos. After the defeat of the Andals, the Valyrians started to set up colonies in western Essos. When a fleet of slave ships set out from Valyria towards a new colony in Severos, the slaves took control of the fleet and sailed north, discovering a hidden lagoon to hide in and founding the city of Bravos. The dragon riders of Valyria flew all over the known world and all over the unknown. Riders flew south, deep into Severos, but only found jungles and deserts, and ruins of ancient cities covered in jungle. Everywhere they flew, they discovered black oily stones, like the ones that the Bloodstone Emperor worshipped thousands of years before, which was said to have fallen from the sky. In Westeros, the Dragon Lords were believed to have traveled to Old Town, finding the ancient oily black rock that the High Tower would later be built on, and trading with the elder races. Sept and Barth claimed that the Valyrians came to Westeros because their priests spoke of the doom from beyond the Narrow Sea. It is not known why the Valyrians stopped interacting with Westeros, but Archmaester Periston thought that some tragedy fell upon them there. Like many topics I have spoken of today, the Rhoynish Wars are vast enough to have a video of their own, but I will briefly cover them. They include the First Turtle War, the War of the Three Princes, the Second Turtle War, the Fisherman's War, the Salt War, the Third Turtle War, the War of the Dagger Lake, and the Spice War. The Rhoynish Wars came to an end during the Second Spice War. A Valyrian colony called Volantis wanted the riches of the ancient Rhoynar civilization. Prince G.R.R.M of Croyne gathered an army of 250,000 Rhoynar and defeated the Valyrians at Celiors and Valisar. At Volan Ferris, G.R.R.M the Great and his army defeated 100,000 Valyrians and slew 2 dragons. The Freehold did not take this defeat lightly, and called upon its Dragon Lords to destroy the Rhoynish army. 300 Dragon Lords flew west and descended on G.R.R.M's army. The heat vaporized the Rhoynish army, and the river itself evaporated into vast clouds of steam. Nearly every single Rhoynish capable of fighting was killed, and the entire manpower of that ancient civilization was forever gone. Princess Nymeria took her remaining people and sailed to terrible places like Severos, attempting to hide from the Valyrians. Nymeria and the Rhoynish eventually sailed to Dorne, and the locals were without a doubt amazed at the sight of 10,000 Rhoynish ships appearing on the horizon. The Rhoynish joined with House Martell, and together they unified all of Dorne. Now, at the height of their power, the Freehold covered nearly all of Essos, from the Narrow Sea in the west to the Bone Mountains in the east. The three cities became self-ruling subjects of the Valyrians. Tyrosh and Volantis started as military outposts, but became their own great cities. Myr and Pentos were built in what used to be Andal territories, and acted as centers of trade. Lys was created as a Valyrian pleasure area, where dragon lords and nobles could live in paradise. Lorath, Norvos, and Kohor were created by religious refugees. Near the kingdom of Sarnor, Essaria was founded. Oros, Teria, Celiors, Volan Ferries, and Valisar were governed by Valyrian archons. South of the Painted Mountains, the Archons ruled over Borash, Mentaris, and Talos. Elaria and Velos were located in Slaver's Bay, but were also ruled by Archons. Remnants of the Empire of Oldgis, Astapor, Marine, Yunkai, Kazai, Gardak, Vasefi, and Vazmesha, also boach of the Valyrian Dragon Lords. On the Basilisk Islands, south of the Summer Sea, the Freehold ruled Gargazos and free failed colonies at Basilisk's Point, on the continent of Severos. Mentions are also made of the Freehold cities by the names of Akos, Dahin, Draconis, Misafair, and Ras. Ruined Roinish cities in Valyrian territories were Arnoe, Croane, Goyen Drohi, Nisar, Sarmel, and Sarhoi. The Valyrians had hair of silver and gold, and blonde hair. Their eyes were dark purple, pale blue, and lilac. The purest of the Valyrians were said to have looks that were almost not human. Just like the others from the lands of Always Winter, to keep the Valyrian bloodline pure, they married within their own families, a practice the Targaryens would later bring to Westeros. 1,000 different languages were spoken within the Freehold, and the main language was High Valyrian. The gods they worshipped were named Balerion, Meraxes, Vagar, and Syrax. Some maesters believe that the Dragon Lords equally disliked all religion, and purposefully allowed their subjects to worship hundreds of gods, to keep them from unifying under one god against their masters. The Valyrians were masters of what many would call magic, using their wizards in battle and their dragons to conquer vast territories. Dragons were guided by magic horns, sorcery, and whips. The Freehold was never ruled by a single king or emperor, but was instead ruled by the Freeholders themselves, which was anyone who held land. Everyone had a say in the government, but the power was dominated by 40 powerful families, and the iron will of the Dragon Lords. One of these families were the Targaryens. The structures built by the Freeholders were made with fire and magic, wielded by powerful sorcerers. Their powerful magic allowed them to liquefy stone and shape it into any structure. The dragon roads that span the Freehold are still used thousands of years later, and the weapons they forged are still used in battle. When the Valyrian Freehold defeated the ancient legions of Oldgis, they adopted their use of slaves. By the time the Freehold spanned western Essos, slavery was as normal as night and day. It was said that in time of war, the Valyrians took slaves, and in time of peace, they bred them. The mines below the 14 Fires were the final resting place of hundreds of thousands, and as the Freehold grew, so did its hunger for ore. Many wars were fought for the sole purpose of capturing slaves, and many wars were fought to end slave revolts. But even after centuries of digging below the 14 Flames, the absolute vast amounts of gold and silver discovered by the Valyrians were still far less than that of the fabled Yeti Empire had thousands of years before. The Valyrian Freehold had peaked in greatness, and was in its final centuries of expansion. The Valyrian Freehold, now around 4,000 years old, established a final colony in the Narrow Sea. The Dragon Lord family by the name of Targaryen settled this island, and built a vast fortress named Dragonstone, from which they traded with the Westerosi, selling them Valyrian steel blades and other exotic goods. 126 years before Aegon's conquest, a daughter of the noble Dragon Lord Aenar Targaryen had a vision of an impending doom. The entirety of the Targaryen household abandoned Valyria and traveled to live on Dragonstone. House Celtigar and House Valyrian, noble families of Valyria, also traveled to Blackwater Bay. The Celtigar settled on Claw Island, while the Valyrians settled on Driftmark. Nearly 5,000 years after the defeat of Oldgis, the Great Valyrian Freehold's end was upon it. 114 years before Aegon would sit the Iron Throne, the Valyrian Peninsula was engulfed in flames. Every hill for 500 miles exploded, and the sky was filled with endless plumes of ash and smoke. No dragons could escape the destruction. The land was split into many islands, the lakes turned to acid and the rivers boiled away. From the 14 fires, molten rocks were sent far into the sky, forming red clouds from which rained dragon glass. It was a cataclysm no civilization had ever gone through, while the heartland of the Freehold was absolutely and utterly annihilated. Massive waves traveled across the sea, submerging entire coastal cities. Many have explanations for what had happened, some of which include infighting between the Dragon Lords, leading to assassinations of fire mages, or the curse of G.R.R.M the Great. The doom of Valyria was the beginning of a century of blood, in which Essos slowly killed itself through infighting. Many of the remaining ancient civilizations were destroyed, and the Dothraki horse lords rose to power. Where great cities and Valyrian roads once stood was now grass. The earth itself started to swallow the ruins, and over those ruins great Khalasars started to form. The ancient kingdom of Sarnor was destroyed, and the Ibbenese kings were pushed out of Essos, and the ever free cities fought one another. As the century of blood came to an end, most of Essos west of the Bones was in ruin, and everywhere people went, they found only ruins and forgotten cities. The Dothraki destroyed around 22 cities. Thousands of years of history simply vanished. When the century of blood had ended, the free cities ruled the west, the great masters ruled Slaver's Bay, and the Dothraki ruled the Great Grass Sea. On Dragonstone, one of the final Dragon Lords and the Blood of Valyria plotted to conquer the Seven Kingdoms. In the year 2 BC, Aegon landed, building his first stronghold in Westeros. This stronghold was named the Aegon Fort, and in a few years it would be the location of the Iron Throne.
They held each other close, then turned their backs on the end, the hills that split asunder,
and the black that ate the skies.
the flames that shot so high and hot that even dragons burned.
Would never be the final sights that fell upon their eyes.
A fly upon a wall,
The waves, the sea wind.
whipped and churned.
A city of 1,000 years, and all that men had learned. The doom consumed it all alike, and neither of them turned.
Thank you for watching, and I hope that you have a better idea of the scale of time and when certain events happened. Like I said in the beginning, a lot of dates are approximations, and I used the world of ice and fire when guessing the date of the Empire of the Dawn. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, and if you want to know whenever I upload new content, subscribe to this channel and hit the notifications bell, so that you won't ever miss a video. I have been Maester Atale, and I hope to see you soon. Have a great day.